Good evening. Thank you all for joining us. Your Excellency Munir Akram, President of the United Nations Economic and Social Council, Excellencies, heads of agencies, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Lana Wong, and I'd like to welcome all of you to this special event of the 2021 ECOSOC High-Level Political Forum. I'm honored to be moderating today's launch of the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, also known as the SOFI report. This is the third consecutive year that it's being launched on the sidelines of the HLPF. This flagship report presents the most recent estimates on hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition in all its forms. And it's also a great example of collaboration and the one UN ethos, as it's co-authored by 5 UN agencies: FAO, IFAD, UNICEF, WFP, and WHO. It also reaffirms their commitment to working together to free the world from hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. Before we start, a few housekeeping notes. I hope you'll see that we have some housekeeping rules posted in the chat box, and interpretation is available in all 6 UN languages, and the languages can be selected at the bottom bar of your Zoom window. We do need to finish the event on time, so I do ask the speakers to please keep to the time limits requested. We'd like to hear all the voices, the amazing voices that have been assembled here today. This event is being webcast live on UNTV, FAO, also on Twitter and YouTube, and will be available later on the UN and FAO websites. We'll also be sharing resources linked to the report in the chat box. And if you're active on social media, we'd love for you to add your voice to the conversation using the hashtag SOFI 2021, SOFI 2021. So for those of you who may be new to the SOFI report, it's a critical tool used by the UN system to monitor the Sustainable Development Goal targets of ending hunger, ending all forms of malnutrition, and also to increase understanding of the main drivers behind recent trends in hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition. Today, we'll also look at how the COVID-19 pandemic, its socioeconomic impacts, and uneven recovery might impact the number of undernourished people in 2030. We have many distinguished speakers today, including the president of the ECOSOC as host of HLPF and the heads of the co-authoring agencies, who will discuss if we're really doing enough to live up to the promise of eradicating hunger and malnutrition to transform our world. In the members segment, member countries will have the opportunity to make brief 2-minute interventions, and questions would be preferred to statements. We've already received many requests to take the floor, and we will start with those. So if you would like to also take the floor, please raise your hand using the raised hand function in the participants menu. And if everyone can keep to time, we'll try to include as many voices as possible. If you have questions, please do post them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them, as many as possible during the course of the event. So there's so much to learn and discuss today, but before we dive in, let's kick off with a video that gives an overview of the report's main findings.
Even before the COVID-19 pandemic, the world was not on track to end world hunger and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. Under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic, up to 161 million more people were facing hunger in 2020 than in 2019. New figures estimate that between 720 and 811 million people around the world faced hunger in 2020. The prevalence of undernourishment increased this past year to reach a level of 9.9%. Around 660 million people may still face hunger in 2030, in part due to lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on global food security. This represents 30 million more people than in a scenario in which the pandemic had not occurred. More than half the world's undernourished are found in Asia. An additional 1/3 reside in Africa. Globally, 2.37 billion people did not have access to adequate food in 2020, an increase of nearly 320 million people in 1 year. Globally, malnutrition in all its forms also remains a challenge. In 2020, 149.2 million children under age 5, or 22%, were affected by stunting and 6.7% suffered from wasting. The actual figures are expected to be higher due to the effects of COVID-19. 38.9 million children under 5, or 5.7%, are overweight. In 2019, the high cost of healthy diets combined with income inequality caused healthy diets to be too expensive for around 3 billion people, a number expected to increase for 2020. In this environment, food systems transformations aimed at bolstering food security and nutrition are more important than ever before. Major drivers negatively affecting food security and nutrition include conflict, climate variability and extremes, and economic slowdowns and downturns. When food systems transformations focus on fostering greater resilience to these drivers, food systems can better provide affordable and healthy diets that are sustainable and inclusive. 6 transformation pathways, tailored to their specific context, will help us emerge from the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. And such a transformation can be a powerful driving force towards ending hunger, food insecurity and malnutrition in all its forms for all.
I think you'll all agree that the statistics in that video are grim and incredibly sobering, especially when you think about the real human lives behind those overwhelming numbers. We are sadly not on track to achieve zero hunger by 2030, and that's the goal that the world agreed upon 6 years ago. And the COVID-19 pandemic has sadly made that goal even more challenging. How can we accept that millions upon millions of people go hungry every day in a world that produces enough food to feed its entire population? How can we transform food systems to make healthy diets affordable for everyone? The SOFI report aims to arm policymakers with the data, analysis, and recommendations for action on this urgent issue. There's really no time to waste. So it is now my honor to invite the president of ECOSOC to deliver his remarks as host of this special event. Please welcome His Excellency Munir Akram, Permanent Representative of Pakistan to the United Nations and President of ECOSOC.
Thank you very much, Ilana, for the invitation and for giving me the floor. Mr. Director General of the FAO, Mr. Executive Director of the World Food Programme, heads of agencies, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I'm pleased to join you for the launch of the report on the state of food security and nutrition of the world 2021. I congratulate the co-authoring agencies, FAO, IFAD, UNICEF, WFP, and WHO for the exemplary UN partnership on this very important and critical goal of zero hunger. This is the 3rd time the report is launched during the high-level political forum on sustainable development. It is befitting, given the long-standing concern expressed by the forum about the trends on SDG 2. This report is an important UN system tool for monitoring progress towards SDG 2 targets, one on ensuring access to safe, nutritious, and sufficient food for all people all around, and 2, on eradicating all forms of malnutrition. This report shows that millions worldwide are now suffering from the devastating effects of COVID-19 on food systems. Since the SOFI 2021 report provides the first ever assessment of global food security and nutrition since the onset of the pandemic, its findings can support evidence-based policies inspired by a better understanding of the long-term implications of COVID-19 for sustainable development and people's well-being. The report also provides timely guidance on how to transform our agri-food systems to specifically address the drivers of the recent food security and nutrition setbacks. Excellencies, today the world confronts a looming agricultural crisis. 600 million suffer from hunger. 2.3 billion, as we've just heard, have inadequate access to food. Over 100 million children are stunted each year due to undernourishment. Unfortunately, the COVID-19 pandemic is likely to push another 120 million people into extreme poverty. Many countries are food insecure. The World Food Programme has warned of the danger of famine in some of the poorest countries and conflict zones. Lack of financing, shortage of investment, trade distortion, unsustainable production and consumption patterns, the degradation of agricultural lands and forests are all impeding the production and distribution of food where it is needed. We are also facing an impending water crisis and the loss of biodiversity, which will be major reasons for further insecurity in access to food and a rising cost and a rising cause of poverty. If we are to end poverty and hunger, we will need to do several things. First, invest in sustainable agricultural infrastructure to facilitate transport, production, and distribution of agricultural inputs and food products. Second, governments need to more actively ensure adequate and fair prices for agricultural and food products. The so-called magic hand of the market should be married to the very visible hand of the state. Small farmers should not be left to the mercy of corporations. Similarly, international agricultural trade must be rationalized. The huge agricultural subsidies provided by certain richer economies distort global markets and make it impossible for farmers in the developing countries to compete. Third, the new and breakthrough agricultural technologies and techniques must be consciously applied to enhance food production, ensure efficient water and land usage, and improve seed quality. Fourth, the adoption of digital technologies is as vital in agriculture as it is in other economic sectors. Ensuring internet and broadband access to the rural areas will be vital for their integration into national and global supply chains. Fifth, and perhaps the most important, we must rethink our patterns of food consumption and production. We can eat better, and many of us would do well to eat less. We can produce food with greater respect for nature. We can stop the pollution of our lakes, rivers, and oceans. We can produce more with less water and without dangerous chemicals. I hope these elements will be considered as part of a new strategy for sustainable food production and consumption at the Food Systems Summit this year. I also believe SOFI can help us develop such a coordinated and multilateral response and galvanize global solidarity based on strong political leadership and a concern for the most vulnerable. Let us work together for zero hunger by 2030. I thank you.
Thank you so much, Your Excellency. And we thank you for your commitment and your leadership on this critical issue that, as you has so ably pointed out, touches so many parts of so many sectors across the whole Sustainable Development Agenda. And now it is my pleasure to also welcome and introduce the Director General of the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations, Mr. Chu Dong-yu. You have the floor.
Thank you, moderator. Dear brother Munir Akram, good morning, good afternoon to everyone, and the President of EXOC. You gave us very holistic and roof design. how to transform agri-food systems. We can follow your instruction and guidance to implement for the members on the ground. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, in 2020, up to 811 million people faced hunger in the world. That means as many as 161 million people more than in 2019. More than half of the world undernourished are found in Asia, 418 million, and more than 1/3 in Africa, it's about 282 million. Unless we take urgent action, around 660 million people may still facing the hunger in 2030. In part due to the lasting effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the global food security, nearly 2.37 billion people did not have access to adequate food in 2020. This is an increase of 320 million people in just 1 year. The current rate of the global progress on the child stunting, exclusive breastfeeding, and low birth weight is insufficient. Progress in addressing child overweight, child wasting, anemia in women, and adult obesity is stalled or worsening. The world is not on track to achieve the global target for any of the nutritious indicators by 2030. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Food and Agriculture Organization of United Nations, together with our 4 partners agencies, I'm pleased to present to you 2021 edition of the State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World, so-called SOFI. This is the 5th time we produced this report jointly, and the 3rd time we launched it in a special event during the high-level political forum. The world is at a critical juncture, very different from where it was 6 years ago, when it committed to the goal of ending hunger, food insecurity, and all forms of malnutrition by 2030. Health deaths continue to be out of reach for around 3 billion people because of their high cost and due to the high value levels of the poverty and income inequality. Millions of children are still affected by the stunting, wasting, and overweight, while the adult obesity continues to increase in all the regions. Disruption in essential nutrition interventions and the negative impact on the dietary patterns during the COVID-19 pandemic have challenged access to adequate nutrition. These setbacks hiding some important achievement, such as increase the increase in the prevalence of exclusive breastfeeding of infants under 6 months. And my colleague from WHO and UNICEF knows that 6 years ago, we were optimistic that the past progress would keep us on the track to achieve this goal, but the trend has shown we are not going in the right direction. The pandemic made the pathway towards our goal even steeper, but it has also widely exposed the fragility of our agri-food systems, giving us a unique opportunity to build forward better. We have less than a decade to go. Actually, only 9 seasons by agricultural term to prove that our commitment and action were bold enough. We must not hesitate to act when the UN report like the SOFI put such a staggering evidence in front of us. The theme of the SOFI this year is the transforming food system for food security, improve the nutrition and affordable healthy diet for all. It is well aligned with the widespread recognition that the food systems are central to build forward better. The report focuses on the food component of agri-food systems, but the transformation need will affect the entire agri-food systems. Ladies and gentlemen, Economic downturn, climate extremes, and conflict are the major drivers behind food insecurity and malnutrition in many parts of the world, even before the pandemic. The countries with a high level of inequality in all its dimensions, these major drivers affect the people's food security and nutrition even more. The measure to contain the spread of COVID-19 resulted in an unprecedented economic downturn. In low and middle income countries, this economic downturn, sometimes in interaction with the climate extreme and conflicts, have led to increase in hunger, increases that are 5 times greater than the high surge of the last 20 years. We should also acknowledge that the situation could have been worse without the government's proposed response and also impressive social protection measures they have put in place. Ladies and gentlemen, when we launched this report last year, we said that the SDGs demand from us to think out of the box and to see how our efforts towards one goal enable progress towards the other goals. We have no choice but to transform the agri-food systems to address the major drivers of food insecurity and malnutrition. The UN Food Systems Summit 2021 is an opportunity to bring forward a series of concrete solutions and actions. The report this year identifies 6 transformation pathways to address the negative impact of the major drivers of food insecurity and malnutrition. Integrating humanitarian development, peace building policies in conflict-affected areas, scaling up climate resilience across the food systems, strengthening economic resilience of the most vulnerable to economic adversities, to intervene along the food supply chain to lower the cost of nutritious food, tackling poverty and structural inequalities, ensuring interventions are pro-poor and inclusive, and strengthening food environment and the changing consumer behavior to promote the dietary patterns with positive impact on the human health and the environment. These transformative pathways will only work with the coherent policy and actions to minimize the negative consequence of change while maximizing its benefit. We will also need a system approach for building coherent portfolio of policy, investment, and legislation that become a win-win solution, including a territorial approach like our flagship hand-in-hand initiative, ecosystem approach, indigenous people's food system approach, and the interventions that systematically address protracted crisis conditions. Ladies and gentlemen, we stand firmly committed to working in partnerships for the transformation to more efficient, more inclusive, more resilient, and more sustainable agri-food systems for better production, better nutrition, a better environment, and better life, leaving no one behind. Let's work together and more deliverable to the members we serve. Thank you.
Thank you, Director General, for that passionate call to action to build forward better together. And now it is my pleasure and honor to welcome Ms. Henrietta Fore, the Executive Director of UNICEF.
Thank you very much, Lana, and my very good colleagues, President Munir Akram, participants, and friends. UNICEF appreciates the close collaboration across our agencies to make this important report happen once again this year. And most of all, we appreciate and celebrate the inspiring progress the world has made in recent years, progress that is captured in this report. Since 2000, the world has reduced the prevalence of children under 5 suffering from stunting by 1/3, and the number of children with stunting by 55 million. So positive change for nutrition is possible and is happening at scale. But there is significant work to be done, as you've been hearing. The COVID-19 pandemic disrupted and continues to disrupt all of the systems related to good nutrition, from food and health to social protection programs and to families who are struggling financially. This means that millions of children are still struggling to access the nutritious and safe diets that they need to grow, to learn, to develop, and to reach their full potential. For example, a national survey in Indonesia supported by UNICEF found that 31% of households reported food shortages compared to just 3% in the previous year. And 38% reported eating less than usual compared to just 5% the previous year. We are seeing similar findings around the world. In total, 90% of the countries reported a decline in the coverage of nutrition services during the pandemic. And on average, 40% of the world's nutrition services were disrupted. The global nutrition community has rallied around these needs with adapted programming and innovations like large-scale vitamin A supplementation and the early detection and treatment of severe wasting during the pandemic. But the pandemic alone is not to blame for the food and nutrition crisis. As this year's report reminds us, conflicts, climate change, economic recessions are also driving food insecurity and malnutrition. Famine should be consigned to history, yet in multiple countries they loom again. Poverty is shrinking incomes and placing nutritious, safe, and diverse foods and diets out of reach for families. In 2020, an estimated 149 million, or more than 1 in 4 children under 5 years of age, were suffering from stunting. And 45 million were suffering from wasting, and almost 39 million were affected by overweight. While some countries and regions have made significant progress, most will fall far short of their 2030 nutrition targets. To turn this tide, we need to overhaul our collective approach to food systems. This means tackling some endemic challenges with our current food systems. Challenges like decisions on what food is produced and how it is processed, packaged, and promoted. And like the fact that the most nutritious food is costly and out of reach for millions of families who are forced to rely on affordable, available, and heavily marketed and processed alternatives that are often unhealthy. So last year, we launched the UNICEF Nutrition Strategy 2020 to 2030, which outlines our goal to protect and promote diet, services, and practices that support good nutrition for all children in both development and humanitarian contexts. With our partners across the food system, we're working to improve, number 1, the quality of children's foods, number 2, the quality of children's food environments, number 3, the quality of children's food practices. The upcoming UN Food Systems Summit is a key opportunity to move this agenda forward and bring our partners together around common solutions. Solutions like increased advocacy and awareness around these systems and how they are failing children, like country compacts that bring countries together to design and to deliver solutions that can improve children's diets. We also need to strengthen data, measurement, and accountability, including through new indicators around children's diet quality. Above all, we need partnerships and resources to deliver the kind of change that we need to see. Governments, businesses, academics, scientists, and young people themselves all working together to gather political momentum and funding to this issue. It is events like this and the upcoming Food Systems Summit that are important opportunities to turn up the volume on this emergency and to speak with one voice loudly and clearly that global and local food systems are failing to provide children the diets that they need to grow and develop their full potential. So we must do better. In closing, as a global community, I am convinced that we will. UNICEF is proud to be on this journey with you, so let us keep going. Thank you. Back to you, Lana.
Thank you, Executive Director, and thank you for raising your voice so loudly and joining this chorus across the UN food system to come together to fight for the most vulnerable. We appreciate your leadership and your work. And now I would like to move on to our next speaker. It is my honor to introduce Mr. David Beasley, the Executive Director of the World Food Program.
Lana, thank you very much. My connection is not great, so we'll move forward, but thank you. And it's always great to hear Dr. Chu and Henrietta. They're just fabulous and great partners, and WHO and EFAD, all of us together working on this report. And hopefully, as Henrietta says, this report, if this is not a wake-up call, I don't know what is, because when you look at the numbers from 650 million to 811 million people in just 1 year, 161 million increase. That's just do the math. That's almost 500,000 additional people per day. Now, this doesn't even include, this is just chronic hunger. Just chronic hunger. This doesn't include the shock, the acute hungry people. That number was 80 million people 5 years ago. It spiked to 135 million right before COVID. Now it's at 270 million people. So do the math in 1 year there. That's 135 million people, just 1 year of acute food insecure people, on top of the 161 million people last year in chronic hunger, which gives you 296 million people literally in serious trouble around the world in just 1 year. Do the math. That's almost 1 million people per day increase. 2 days, 2 million, 3 days, 3 million, 4 days, 4 million. So we're heading in the wrong direction. To think that we're going to end hunger by 2030, that's not even possible given the direction, the trajectory that we're on now. And if we don't address these issues in a very serious way, you're going to have mass famine and destabilization of nations and mass migration. And so we've got to respond. We've got to respond immediately. We know what happens when we don't address root causes. And this is a wake-up call to the entire world. And when I think about the simple fact that last year at the height of COVID, a billionaire was created every 17 hours in the height of COVID. And every day, the net worth increase of billionaires was 5.2 billion per day. And the number of people that are in IPC level 4, that's 41 million people that are knocking on famine's door. That requires a little over 6 billion. There's $400 trillion worth of wealth in the world today. There shouldn't be a single child that Henrietta's talking about in the world that has a nutrition issue, with all of the wealth and all the increase in financial wealth just in the past 12 months. The fact that we're begging and screaming is a disgrace on humanity. I'm proud that the fact that we can send private sector spaceships around planet Earth, but my God, we've got a crisis right here on planet Earth where we speak, where children are dying by the day. 3 million people died from COVID last year. 9 million people died from starvation. And this year it's going to be double or triple of that if we do not get our act together. And we see what happens when we don't come in and address root causes. It costs anywhere from 100 to 1,000 times more money when we don't come in advance. And so the world's got to wake up. The news media around the world has got to start reporting things that really matter around the world and provide balanced news coverage. If starvation of humanity is not a number one issue in the world, I don't know what is. And so to my colleagues, thank you. We look forward to working together. All the perm reps and the ministers that are with us this morning, we've got to message to the leaders around the world, the prime ministers and the presidents, that they've got to get focused. Ending wars, climate change, responding so that we can have a healthy planet. I have no doubt we've got the experience and the expertise to do it. We need the willpower politically to give us the funds to make certain that we prioritize our children and our future here on planet Earth. So thank you, Lana. Good to be with you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Beasley. And thank you for bringing just the simple math. You don't need to be a mathematician to understand the power of those shocking numbers that you reeled off, and also highlight this crisis of inequity that seems to have been incredibly exacerbated by the COVID crisis. So I appreciate your passion and your humanity, and hope that we can all take cues from that today. So now moving on, I'd like to welcome and introduce Ms. Susanna Jakob, the WHO Deputy Director General, for your remarks.
Thank you, Lana. Your Excellency, Ambassador Munir Akram, President of the Economic and Social Council, Dr. Calibata, Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit, heads of UN agencies, colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, good morning, good afternoon, good evening to all of you. It is my pleasure to talk to you today on behalf of Dr. Tedros and together with all of you, with our partners, to launch this very important report. This year's State of Food Security and Nutrition in the World report reminds us that despite global efforts and earlier progress, hunger and malnutrition in all its forms remains a huge challenge. This was true before the COVID-19 pandemic uprooted many of our previous gains and set back progress even further, the realities of which will unfold and be felt in the years to come. The number of people who are hungry is increasing. Global progress to reduce stunting and increase rates of optimal breastfeeding is noteworthy, but has slowed down. Around the world, there are still 149 million children affected by stunting and 45 million children suffering from wasting, most of whom live in Africa and in Asia. On the other side of the coin, childhood overweight is not improving, and rates of adult obesity are increasing across the world. Progress in addressing the root causes of hunger, malnutrition in all its forms, and disease remains vastly insufficient and inequitable. The achievement of the targets of the Sustainable Development Agenda seem further out of reach than ever. In parallel, new challenges in malnutrition are emerging. The high cost of nutritious foods puts healthy diets out of reach for nearly 3 billion people in the world. The shift in global food systems has meant that many countries face a double burden of malnutrition, a simultaneous presence of both undernutrition and obesity in the same populations. We need to renew our global commitment to fight hunger and malnutrition in all its forms to achieve the SDGs, especially SDG 2. In the words of our Director General, now is not the time for incremental improvements. Now is the time for bold ideas, bold commitments, and bold leadership to do things that have never been done before. This is true for global health security and for transforming our food systems. Some of the major pathways through which food systems impact health are unhealthy diets and food insecurity, with impact on overweight and obesity, undernutrition, and diet-related diseases. WHO proposes a new food systems for health narrative using a One Health approach, which aims to place health at the center of food system transformation. This narrative highlights actions that can help policymakers deliver impact across food systems for better human, animal, and planetary health. WHO is committed to supporting governments and their partners to investigate the intersections between health and food systems and to take food systems actions to improve health as well as society, the economy, and the planet. WHO provides guidance and tools for game-changing solutions, including on the reformulation of food products, fiscal policies, regulation of marketing of foods and beverages, including breast milk substitutes, nutrition labeling, and public food procurement of food contributing to healthy diets. As we recover from the devastation of COVID-19, we have to think ahead and build towards a healthier, fairer, and greener world. We have a major opportunity to address these issues at the forthcoming UN Secretary General's Food Systems Summit. The summit's outcomes will shape the actions of the second half of the decade of action on nutrition. We must come together to transform our food systems and make bold commitments to build a world in which no one is hungry, no one is malnourished and unhealthy from a preventable cause, and no one is left behind. Thank you for your attention. Back to you, Lana.
Thank you, Ms. Jacob, and thank you for your commitment and the call to for the bold ideas for coordinated solutions across the board. And now we would like to move to Mr. Dominic Ziegler, the IFAD Vice President, for your remarks.
Thank you, Lana, and dear colleagues, excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. Let me start with a personal remark. I think for all of us who are working in development cooperation and working to end hunger and malnutrition in all its form by 2030, this SOFI report is an invaluable resource. And in particular in this year, because it's the first large report that addresses the consequences of COVID and gives us additional intelligence of how to combat it. So I congratulate and thank all the colleagues at all the 5 agencies for the continued collaboration despite these exceptional circumstances. Among this year's findings, let me highlight just one. Around 3 billion people do not have sufficient access to healthy diets because of high levels of poverty and income equality. And David Beasley just said it, we need to tackle the root causes of hunger. And poverty is a principal cause. If we want to end hunger and malnutrition once and for all, it is time that we approach food security and nutrition from a systems perspective, from a perspective that also includes poverty. And our starting point must be the rural areas, because this is where poverty is most entrenched. 3/4 of the world's poorest people live in the rural areas of the developing countries. IFAD has its core customers in these countries, the small-scale producers. They are critical for the food security and the nutrition of vulnerable groups, especially in these rural and remote areas. These producers serve domestic and local markets, including communities that modern supermarkets and supply chains do not reach. Globally, the small-scale producers produce 30% of the food we eat. In parts of the world, in Latin America, Sub-Saharan Africa, it's even 70 or 80% of the food calories. When these small producers thrive, so do surrounding communities. People eat better, people live better, and the whole community benefits. Higher incomes boost the rural economy, generating more jobs, stopping the urbanization, and also offering more economic opportunities. This is a multiplier effect, and it is why we need stronger and more resilient food systems. This investment in rural development, for me, it's really key here. It is estimated that growth from agriculture reduces poverty 2 to 3 times faster than growth outside agriculture. So investing in small-scale agriculture makes also economic sense. And healthy food systems need small farms. They have higher yields than larger farms in comparable landscapes. And small farms have greater biodiversity, not just crops, but of many other forms of life, including bees and pollinators. Susanna just said it, we need a greener world. Hence, these people are vital for health, nutrition, and the environment. Ladies and gentlemen, in the coming years, IFAD will work closely with the other development partners on the 6 transformation pathways outlined in the SOFI report. In particular, we will help scale up climate resilience across food systems. We will endeavor to strengthen the resilience of those most vulnerable to economic adversity, and we will work to reduce the cost of nutritious food. And as an agency dedicated to ending extreme poverty and hunger, we will continue to tackle poverty and structural inequalities, and we will join forces with our partners in government and the private sector to make sure investments are pro-poor and inclusive. And Lana, you started the session with the question, are we doing enough? And I end the session as I start, my intervention as I started it by being a bit outspoken and a bit personal. No, we are not doing enough, because there are more root causes of hunger and malnutrition. within the global community, on the regional, national, local, and individual level, many players are not treating this planet in a sustainable way. Consumption patterns cause climate change and thus natural disaster that leads to hunger and malnutrition. The egoism of those who consume today as if there was no tomorrow creates the destruction of livelihoods, hunger, malnutrition of many people in developing countries tomorrow. So this must stop. And hunger and poverty, all the experts are saying it, will be more and more concentrated in fragile and conflict-affected countries. Again, it is us human beings that cause these conflicts for individual, national, or other egoistic reasons. This destroys livelihoods, colleagues, and it affects production, it affects supply chains, it affects governance, and it also leads to investors shying away from these countries, these regions, these areas. All of this has to stop if we want to really tackle all the root causes of hunger. All this egoism has to end if we want to live up to the promise that we made in 2015 that we end hunger and malnutrition by 2030. And I hope that the report taking this holistic stance will also show us pathways how we can do better on having this food systems perspective, this holistic systems perspective that also takes into consideration how to make supply chains more resilient against fragility, against bad governance, and against climate change. Many thanks.
Thank you so much for that personal and passionate set of remarks and the call to action, and also for highlighting the plight of the rural poor and the most vulnerable on the small agricultural areas as well. So with that, we are concluding our opening segment with our high-level speakers from the co-authoring agencies, and a special thanks to all of you for your contributions. I now would like to turn to Agnes Calibata, the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for the 2021 UN Food Systems Summit Vision. Ms. Calibata, you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you for those introductory remarks. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to be part of the launch of the SOFI report this year. This report, as the Vice President of IFAD has said, is extremely important to many of us that work on the scourge of hunger and malnutrition. And many of you have said it too, that well before COVID-19 pandemic started, we already knew that we were off track to reducing hunger and malnutrition. We were also seeing high numbers of obesity and overweight that were contrary to what we had committed to. But we also know that food systems transformation offers one of the keys to putting us back on track. In fact, in 2019, the Global Sustainable Development Report identified food systems as one of only 6 entry points for achieving sustainable development goals, not just for SDG 1 and SDG 2, as many of us who work in hunger want to believe, but for all 17 SDGs. So recognizing that opportunity and the criticality of food systems, the Secretary General launched the 2021 Food Systems Summit in 2019, really with the intention of convening the UN Food Systems Summit, which we have since convened. And the summit has set in motion a process which has allowed the global community to identify key actions that need to be taken to transform our food system and to develop an ambitious and optimistic vision for the role that food systems can play in achieving SDGs. I hope that this process, I hope that the process we have set in motion will result in member states making commitments to strategies, policies, and investments that can advance national pathways towards food systems transformation. Today, we have over 140 member states that have put forward their intention to engage in pathways. Many of them are already advanced, and some of them have already submitted to the Food Systems Summit their national pathways. We hope that these recognize the connectivity to food systems and to its ability to transform the global food system for people and for our planet. Across the food system, we are seeing lots of energies emerging from cities, communities, companies, civil society, citizens, development actors, young people, and food producers. We are seeing vibrant communities, especially youth, as I just mentioned, putting together ideas, strengthening food system narratives, and looking for ideas that would transform our food systems. Of course, the energy we are seeing has been given a lot of momentum by COVID-19, and the fact that COVID-19 has significantly affected our food systems, but has also shown the light on the importance of two elements that were often neglected in our food system: the need for greater resilience of food systems and the critical importance of inclusivity in our food system. We will not achieve our 2030 SDGs if we do not work on inclusivity. But inclusiveness also means ensuring the voices of some of the most marginalized are heard. In this Food Systems Summit, we have ensured that Indigenous peoples step forward. We have had over 280 dialogues of Indigenous peoples. We have ensured voices of women, and we have ensured voices of youth. All these people are coming to the Food Systems Summit with their hopes, their dreams, most importantly, for equity and for a more functional food system. As we move towards the pre-summit, which will take place in Rome in the next 2 weeks, our attention must focus on supporting action to deliver against 2030, from national pathways to coalitions of action. A few areas have been identified that aim to reduce hunger and improve nutrition at their core. One of those I must call out is the Zero Hunger Coalition, which is pertinent to what we're discussing today, which is drawn together with work from dozens of solution clusters and is based on evidence generated by the scientific group that has been working on the science of the summit. Another is the Nascent School Meals Coalition, which will need to be developed to ensure not just a nutritious meal for all children, but also that it addresses fiscal sustainability, procurement practices that promote sustainable practices and inclusivity. I know that World Food Programme is leading on this coalition and is doing an amazing job of ensuring that all these issues are being addressed. There's much more to do over the next few months to ensure that we deliver on our ambition. But I would like to close by reiterating the importance of the SOFI report in helping us to deliver on this ambition. The six pathways set out in the SOFI report coincide with what we are identifying in the summit process. So here I must say we have common ground to work on. SOFI is also a great example of collaborative effort across the UN, and we are happy to see this report presented ahead of the Food Systems Summit. SOFI calls for alignment and coherence. Without this, without which we will not be able to build on the momentum that the summit process has generated. So I thank you again for inviting me, and I look forward to working together to end hunger by 2030. Thank you again.
Thank you, Ms. Calibata. And thank you also for highlighting the importance of the collaboration that went behind the SOFI report and the food systems lens that has been taken that will help to deliver the ambition of the UN Food Systems Summit. So thank you very much. And now if we can transition to a more technical segment to help set the scene, I'd like to welcome the FAO Chief Economist, Maximo Torero-Cullen, who will give a technical presentation on the SOFI report.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you very much, Excellencies, and all principals from the all agencies collaborating in the SOFI report. Let me share my screen. So this report monitors progress towards the globally agreed targets, ending both hunger and all forms of malnutrition within the framework of the Sustainable Development Goals. This year is a very special report, as many of you have mentioned, because the world is facing a significant challenge because of the presence of COVID-19. But it's also showing again that we were already off track and off path of achieving SDG 2, and that COVID has exacerbated even more the situation. The report comprises of three chapters. It starts with a description of the latest updates and trends in food security and nutrition, and offers some indication of what hunger will look like by 2030 in a scenario far complicated by the enduring effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. The next chapter provides a synthesis of understanding and empirical analysis of the major drivers behind these trends, along in combination through a food system lens, which is one significant innovation. This is followed by a chapter that offers an in-depth look at the actions and policies that are needed to move from silo solutions to integrated food system solutions that specifically address the challenges posed by the major drivers that we are observing. Well before COVID-19 pandemic, we were already not on track to meet commitments to end world hunger and malnutrition in all its forms by 2030. Now the pandemic has made this significantly more challenging. One of the key questions posed this year in the report is, how did the world get to this critical point? There are four major drivers at play undermining food security and nutrition around the world, now exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic. These major drivers are negatively affecting food security and nutrition by creating multiple compounding impacts throughout our food systems. As shown in the slide, the drivers are divided in two groups: drivers that are external to the food systems, and these are conflicts, climate variability, extremes, economic slowdowns, and downturns, all which are increasing in intensity and frequency and more frequently occurring in combination. Their negative impacts on food security and nutrition are made worse by high and persistent levels of inequality, something that we normally don't talk too much about, the crucial role of inequalities. And the second group is drivers that are internal to the food systems. For example, low productivity and inefficient food supply chain that are pushing up the cost of nutritious foods, which combined with low incomes are increasing the unaffordability of healthy diets, particularly in countries affected by multiple drivers. Millions of people in every country are food insecure and malnourished in all its forms because they cannot afford a minimum cost healthy diet. What are the key numbers that come out on this report? First, up to 811 million people were facing hunger in 2020, up by as many as 161 million in a single year. This was already mentioned by the speakers, but it's a huge jump in 1 year, one of the highest jumps we had in 1 year. More than 650 million may still be facing hunger in 2030. So this moves us structurally out of the path to be able to achieve SDG 2. So it's not only an issue of this year, the effects of this year will continue and will be diluted, but not as much as we will have like by 2030. Beyond hunger, nearly 1 in 3 people in the world were affected by moderate severe food insecurity in 2020. The increase from 2019 to 2020 was equal to that of the previous 5 years combined. So 1 in 3 people in the world were affected by moderate or severe food insecurity. Healthy diets are out of reach for around 3 billion people due to the high cost of healthy diets and high levels of income inequality in many countries. Healthy diets grew more unaffordable in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. With respect to the indicators of nutrition, some progress was made and has been made, but the world is still not on track to achieve global targets. And the COVID-19 pandemic has heightened the challenge. Now, it's important to clarify the concepts, as it was mentioned by Mr. Beasley. It is extremely important to understand that the numbers reported in SOFI and the number of people facing crisis level referred to as acute food insecurity, and which is reported in the Global Food Crisis Report, are not the same. Acute food insecurity is when an sporadic sudden crisis can limit people's access to food in the short term to the point that their lives and livelihoods are at risk. But if we don't take care of them, we don't take care of the acute food insecure, then they can become chronically undernourished. Chronic undernourishment, which is what we report in the SOFI, is a long-term inability to meet food requirements. Therefore, if people facing acute food insecurity get the assistance they need, their situation will not become chronic, and that's the effort we need to do in the emergency work. SOFI reports 2 sets of indicators. First, chronic undernourishment measured by POU, and its correlate measures by the FIES called severe food insecurity. This is a long-term inability to meet food requirements. It is assessed through the POU, which is the SDG indicator 2.11, and is comparable to the prevalence of severe food insecurity of the FIES, the Food Insecurity Experience Scale. The number of chronic undernourished this year is between 720 and 800 million, so up to 811 million people are chronically undernourished. And second, moderate or severe food insecurity combined is when people face uncertainties about their ability to obtain food and have been forced to compromise on the nutritional quality and the quantity of the food they consume. And this is assessed using the Food Insecurity Experience Scale and is the SDG indicator 2.1.2. And this captures, for example, the reduction of the quality of diets because of the lack of access to resources. So clearly, the number is bigger than the 811 million, because if we don't take care of the acute food insecure, which by 2021 has increased substantially to what was reported in the GFR report of 2021, then we will face even a worse situation this year and potentially next year. The SDG indicator used to monitor hunger is the prevalence of undernourishment, or what we call the POU. This year, the estimates are presented as ranges to reflect the added uncertainty around the numbers induced by the COVID-19 pandemic. The prevalence of undernourishment increased by 1.5 percentage points in just 1 year, reaching a level around 10%, heightening the challenge of achieving the zero hunger target by 2030. An estimated number of up to 811 million people were facing hunger in 2020, as I already mentioned. And again, let me repeat, because it is so important. This means up to 161 million more in 1 year under the shadow of the COVID-19 pandemic. Hunger increased in all regions of the world from 2019 to 2020. The sharpest increase in 2019 to 2020 was Africa, followed by Latin America and the Caribbean, and this was surprising. We were not expecting this to happen in a region that was doing well and was reducing the level of undernourishment. COVID-19 exacerbated the situation in that region also, putting it to extreme levels of hunger and undernourishment. More importantly, all subregions in Africa, Latin America, and the Caribbean, and most subregions in Asia also show an increase in the pandemic year. Compared to 2019, about 46 million more people in Africa, 57 more in Asia, and about 40 million more in Latin America and the Caribbean were affected by hunger in 2020. Overall, more than half of the world's undernourished are found in Asia, 418 million, and more than 1/3 in Africa, 282 million. This year, we also did a significant effort on bringing projections to 2030, because this is the challenge of the Food System Summit, and what we need to change, and it's the challenge of the agri-food system transformation that we are aiming to. The projections of the elements that determine the POU values were now done up to 2030, and were estimated using a structural approach based on the Miro-Agrodeb model, a dynamic general equilibrium model, so that we can bring all the interlinkages and all the different relationships with the different sectors, because food and agriculture is linked to many sectors. That's the approach of a food systems. The Miro-Agrodeb model was calibrated to the COVID-19 situation, pre to COVID-19, of the world economy in 2018, and used to generate the projections of macroeconomic fundamentals in 2019 and 2030. And here we brought the latest estimates of the IMF World Economic Outlook, and also we balance everything towards our statistical data on undernourishment that we have already in FAO. Projections that consider the potential impact of COVID-19 pandemic suggest that following a peak of more than 760 million people in 2020, up to 811, global hunger will decline slowly to fewer than 660 million in 2030. Nevertheless, this represents tens of millions more people than projected for 2030 had the pandemic not occurred, revealing possible lasting effects of the pandemic on global food security. So this is not an issue of 1 year, it's not an issue of 2 years. A substantial reduction in hunger is projected for Asia by 2030, but a significant increase is forecast for Africa. This will place Africa on par with Asia by 2030 as the region with the highest number of undernourished people. Unless, of course, we change things. Hunger will not be eradicated by 2030 unless bold actions are taken to accelerate progress, especially actions to address inequality in access to food. This graph shows the evolution of the moderate and severe food insecurity. Red is the severe and orange is the moderate. Nearly 1 in 3 people in the world, 2.37 billion, did not have access to adequate food in 2020, including 60% of the population of Africa. Globally, this is an increase of almost 320 million people in just 1 year. The prevalence of severe food insecurity also increased. Close to 20% of the global population was severely food insecure in 2020, representing 928 million people, 148 million more than 2019. The sharpest increase in 2020 occurred in Africa and Latin America and the Caribbean. However, increases were also seen in North America and Europe. The gender gap in food insecurity has grown even larger in the year of COVID-19 pandemic, with the prevalence of moderate or severe food insecurity being 10% higher among women than men in 2020, compared with 6% in 2019. This again validates the results that we were already seeing on how we were increasing also gender inequalities because of a problem of access to food, because of a loss of income of the female workers. This graph presents the evolution and projections by 2025 and 2030 of all the nutritional indicators: low birth weight, exclusive breastfeeding, stunting under 5 years, wasting under 5 years, overweight under 5 years, anemia, women of reproductive age, and obesity in adults. Although it is not yet possible to fully account for the impact of COVID-19 pandemic due to the data limitations, in 2020 it's estimated that 22%, this is 149.2 million of children under 5 years of age, were affected by stunting, 6.7% by wasting, and 5.7%, 38.9 million, by overweight. Africa and Asia account for more than 9 out of 10 of all children with stunting, more than 9 out of 10 children with wasting, and more than 7 out of 10 children who are affected by overweight worldwide. Nearly 30% of women of reproductive age were affected by anemia in 2019, something which is so simple to resolve. The actual figures of malnutrition, particularly for stunting and wasting, are expected to be higher due to the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. Some preliminary figures indicate a reverse in the decrease curve for the first time in 3 decades, with 2.6 million additional stunting children under 5 by 2020. On childhood wasting, 9.3 million additional wasted children under 5 by 2020. And on maternal malnutrition, 2.1 million additional maternal anemia cases and 2.1 million children born to low body mass index women. Childhood obesity will worsen due to the negative impact on diets and physical activity. And overweight and obesity will significantly increase due to the severity of COVID-19. Most regions have made some progress, but the pace must be accelerated, and we need a significant transformation. The good news is that about 1/4 of countries are confirmed to be on track to reach the 2030 SDG target for childhood stunting and wasting, and about 1/6 of the countries are on track to achieve the target on childhood overweight. These countries account for 40% of children under 5 years of age in the world. The pandemic, as I mentioned before, will increase the long-lasting effects and the negative effects. So we need exceptional efforts to address this and to do the transformation that is needed. Let us now focus on the key drivers mentioned before: conflict, climate extremes and variability, economic downturns and slowdowns, and high income inequality. In the last 10 years, the frequency and intensity of conflict, climate variability and extremes, and economic slowdowns and downturns have increased significantly, as is shown in the graph. These figures show the prevalence of undernourishment by countries affected by these drivers. The increased occurrence of these major drivers, now exacerbated by COVID-19 pandemic, has led to a rise in hunger and has undermined progress in reducing all forms of malnutrition, particularly in low and middle income countries. 70% of low and middle income countries are affected by at least one of the drivers, and 41% also have high income inequality, which worsens the impact. Look at the importance of income inequality. In low and middle income countries affected by these major drivers, the POU is higher and has increased, while it has decreased in countries not affected by any driver. The section is in the year of COVID-19, in 2020, where all the countries saw an increase in POU, but still the increase were higher in countries when the pandemic impacts were combined with the other drivers. The increase in POU is affected by these major drivers is especially pronounced since 2017. Between 2017 and 2019, the POU increased by 4% in countries affected by one or more of these major drivers, while it decreased by 3% in countries not affected by them. High income inequality magnified this negative impact of the drivers, particularly in middle income countries, leading to POU increase were 2 times larger. And that's why we are saying that we are only going to achieve SDG 2 if we also target SDG 10 and SDG 1. 1 is poverty, 2 is zero hunger, and 10 is reduction of inequalities. There are important differences among countries affected by multiple drivers and by countries' income group and region. Looking at increase in POU before 2020 pandemic, countries affected by multiple drivers show the highest increase in the POU, 12 times larger than those in countries affected by only a single driver, 12 times larger. Low-income countries affected by conflict and climate extremes show the largest increase in the POU, while for middle-income countries, the largest increase occurred during the economic downturns. And Africa is the only region with POU increases associated with all three drivers. Again, this brings up the importance of linking agricultural food systems with climate extremes, but also with peace. And we're trying to build peace and to reduction of inequalities and to avoid more slowdowns and downturns. In 2020, economic downturns, including those resulting from COVID-19 containment measures, because we know that the length and the intensity of the containment measure has an exact correlate, negative correlate of GDP growth in these countries, contributed to one of the largest increase in the World Hunger Index, affecting almost all low and middle income countries. Africa, Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean witnessed significant increases in the POU while being hit by economic downturns combined with climate-related disasters, conflict, or a combination of both. Economic downturns combined with climate-related disasters led to high increases in POU in all regions affecting 35 countries. The largest increase in the POU in these cases were Africa, followed by Asia. So again, this is showing to us that we have to follow and we have to do a transformation of agri-food systems, and the Food System Summit is a huge opportunity, but we also need to link this and bring agriculture and the agricultural food systems to the COP and to the nutrition event of Tokyo at the end of this year. Analysis using updated affordability of healthy diet data reconfirms that high levels of unaffordability are strongly associated with undernourishment, severe and moderate food insecurity, and different forms of malnutrition, including child stunting and adult obesity. New analysis also suggests that drivers that are external, example conflicts and climate shocks, and internal, low productivity and inefficient food supply chains, to food systems are pushing up the cost of nutritious food, which combined with low incomes are increasing the unaffordability of healthy diets. Remember, 3 billion people don't have access to healthy diets. Countries affected by multiple drivers exhibit the highest percentage of the population who cannot afford a healthy diet, 68%. 3 billion people, 68%, which is on average 39 and 66% higher than the countries affected by a single driver or not affected by any driver, respectively. The unaffordability of healthy diets tends to be where there is conflict. Even after COVID-19 pandemic is gone, there are dark clouds on the horizon that will continue to challenge our efforts to end hunger and malnutrition. But there are also opportunities. Conflicts and climate extremes and economic swings are a reality that will not disappear, but will continue to occur and increasingly occur in combinations. And that's a lesson learned where resilience can make a big difference. At the same time, persistent and high levels of inequality in all its dimensions and an unaffordability of healthy diets are structural issues that will not be resolved without actions. So the critical question now is what needs to be done? The solution lies in transforming our agri-food systems with greater resilience to major drivers, addressing inequalities, while ensuring affordable, healthy diets that are sustainable and inclusive. In this report, we believe that there are 6 transformative pathways that we need to bring up. And depending on the driver or combination of drivers confronting a country, each of the different combinations of pathways should be applied. Every one of the pathways builds on key recommendations from the in-depth analysis and evidence from previous 4 editions of this SOFI report. The 6 transformative pathways are: first, integrate humanitarian development and peace-building policies in conflict areas. Peace-building efforts linked to livelihood support, nutrition-sensitive social protection, and food production and supply programs ensure functioning food supply chains, community-based approaches in post-conflict policy. The second one is to scale up climate resilience across food systems, reducing climate-related risk and adapting to climate change, climate risk monitoring, and early warning systems in improved access to management of natural productive assets. Third, intervene along the supply chains to lower the cost of nutritious foods. Increase investments for more diverse and productive agricultural sector, increase efficiency of the food value chains, promoting nutritious foods, enacting mandatory food fortification. Fourth, tackle poverty and structural inequalities, like empowering vulnerable and marginalized populations, reducing gender inequality, supporting women's economic activities, and equitable distribution of resources and infrastructure. And then strengthen food environments and changing consumer behavior promoting healthy diets that include sustainability considerations. These pathways could help us to improve what we are supposed to do, these 6 pathways. Now, to be able to achieve this, the food system transformation that this report calls for requires that we move from silos to system-wide approaches. The process on how we build and implement these portfolios is critical if we are to achieve the transformation we need. To inform our recommendations, we undertook extensive global consultations, and this includes global call for best practices in transforming food systems for addressing the majority drivers and ensuring affordability of healthy diets. This generated inputs from more than 80 development institutions and individuals worldwide, as well as 100 or more contributions received. Further recommendations were derived from an online webinar featuring leading international experts and interactive exchange with development practitioners in the field around the world. All these contributions demonstrated how the major drivers can be addressed and the key policy actions that are needed along one or more of these 6 identified pathways. Given many countries are affected by more than one driver, the formulation of portfolio of policies, investments, and legislation need to be elaborated along several pathways simultaneously. This will allow for maximizing their combined effects on food system transformation, exploiting win-win solutions, and mitigating undesirable trade-offs. Key elements of a coherent portfolio of policies, investments, and legislation are the combination of policies, investments, and legislation from one or more of the 6 transformative pathways, depending on the specific drivers affecting the country or subregion. Coherence of this with the policies and investments in other systems, example, health, social protection, and environment, is also essential to build on synergies towards more efficient and effective food system solutions. We need to resolve the problem, taking care of our environment and minimizing greenhouse gas emissions. And for that, we need to include accelerators that facilitate the scale-up of effectiveness of the implementation and impact of portfolios, especially the inclusiveness, because inequalities are a major challenge. And for this, we need to bring inclusive and effective governance, mechanisms and institutions, in addition to access to technology, data innovation, and human capital, because we need to create the human capital that can respond to this agri-food system transformation. Colleagues, with less than a decade to 2030, the world is not on track to ending world hunger and malnutrition. And in the case of the world hunger, we are moving in the wrong direction. COVID-19 pandemic is just the tip of the iceberg. Even more alarming, the major drivers outlined in this report are increasingly occurring simultaneously in countries with interactions and seriously undermining food security and nutrition. We know what needs to be done. The solutions lie in transforming our agri-food systems along the 6 pathways identified in this report and creating coherent portfolios of policies and investments. The UN Food System Summit will bring forward a series of concrete actions to support a transformation of the world food systems. If we are to end hunger and malnutrition in all their forms, the 6 transformative pathways identified in this report must not be overlooked, but take center stage in these discussions and in our actions to move forward. Several decades ago, it was outlined by a previous president when in a conference of FAO. At that time, he said that we could resolve the problem of hunger. We are now few years to 2030, and we are far from it. But still, we have a chance to create the agri-food system transformation that will allow us to be there. So let's move together and let's work together to achieve this goal. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you so much, Maximo, for that incredible overview of the sustainable and inclusive pathways and for giving us some hope in this grim scenario. There are ways and there are pathways to sustainability, inclusion, and resilience. Thank you. And now we are going to move swiftly on to a lightning round of question and answer with our principals. We are running a bit late, so I do ask the principals to please try and keep your responses to this lightning round of questions to 2 minutes if possible. So without further ado, I'll turn to our FAO Director General. Question for you. How do you think the findings of this report will contribute to the discussions of the upcoming UN Food Systems Summit?
I think Agnes Calibata should answer this question better if she's here. But anyway, thank you for your question. It's very good. But I think The SOFI is of the solid professional scientific based base for us to discuss. Second, we have to reprocess the findings and data based on this report to build up on more coherent action. Number one. Number two, I think I expect more stronger political commitment from the Food Summit. And third, I think I fully agree with the president of EXOC. We need more investment on agro-food systems. And third, I think also we need more collective action together with not only UN system agency, and also build the ownership of the members, because government of member states, they will take the tangible, visible transformation of agro-food systems. If they didn't take the ownership based on this report, and how can we assist them? Last but not least, I think we need a younger generation to take on. That's why the FAO, together with Maximo, we will have a World Food Forum after the summit. I want to send the clear message to our younger generation, especially young people, women in the countryside, in the staffs, to take this task and take this mission and mandate to continue to be better reaction. Otherwise, we have no future. Thank you.
I could not agree more. Thank you so much, Director General. We really must harness the power of our next generation and give young people a platform to be involved in this process. So moving on to UNICEF Executive Director Henrietta Fore. What are some of the most important food systems actions highlighted in this report that governments can take to address child malnutrition, excuse me?
Thank you, Lana. And I couldn't agree more with Dong-Yu about the importance of involving young people and children in this. They're going to be the best group that we have to help us. So most important, if 2 out of 3 children are not getting the adequate nutrition that they need to grow and to develop, then we must as a world pay attention to this issue. David and others were talking very eloquently about its importance. You really see it when you see it in children. So number one, we are fragmented in how we implement it. We know what to do, as Maximo said. We know the 6 areas. So couldn't we as a group gather together and change these food systems? Because what is happening is there are 3 areas that we think need immediate attention. So the first is that good nutrition starts in infancy. So breast milk is very important. We have to get those numbers on Maximo's charts to being 100% usage of breast milk in the first 6 months. But we also need micronutrients and supplemental vitamins so that children grow healthily. The second is we have to focus on the quality of the foods themselves that are being produced. So how you process and package and market products is very important. And for this, we can do a lot at the Food Systems Summit. And I think that will be very useful, but it is a public-private partnership that we need for this. And the Scale Up Nutrition movement is on deck and ready to pull in any countries and governments who want to change and want to change their food systems. And then thirdly, it is how children and young people and families choose their food. We have to make it innovative and fun and tempting so that it fits their cultural norms and so that you choose the right kinds of food. We've all been adolescents, and you know that you choose the foods that your friends want and what tastes good, but it may not be nutritious. So we can help in schools with nutrition and education. We can help with parents so that mothers and fathers know how to actually cook nutritious meals for their children that are good for them and that are affordable, accessible, and appealing. And Lana, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Executive Director. And now let's move over to World Food Program. We have with us Arif Hussain, the Chief Economist and Director of Research, Assessment, and Monitoring, to take this question. What are the key elements and what do you think is needed to bend the curve back down again, to really reduce the number of hungry people so that sustained improvements of food security and nutrition can become a reality again?
So if we look at this problem, I mean, there are two things which must happen. First and foremost, we need to take care of the people who are already in trouble. This is the acute food insecurity, which Edie Beasley mentioned, Massimo mentioned. We need to deal with that. Day in, day out, we have to deal with that. And then the second part is to deal with the root causes. Because unless we bring the needs down by addressing the root causes, these numbers will continue to grow up. So what we have seen, learning from history, if I can say it that way, is it's not that we don't know what to do. I mean, countries before have brought hunger down, brought poverty down. And there is almost like a recipe that they have used. And just to name a few things over there, it is about empowerment of women, because half of your labor force is women, even in agricultural sector. It is about nourishing children. It is about investing in rural infrastructure. What is the incentive for smallholder farmer to produce if there is no access to market? It is about social safety nets. And if we have those things, which we know work, what is left? It is the political will. It is the right investment. It is the coordinated response. It is putting governments in the center. If we are talking about sustainably ending hunger, it cannot be done from outside. So combining those things, one, we know what is needed, but on the other side, that political will and that investment and that coordinated response, we can get there. But one other thing I feel quite strongly about is the enabling conditions out there. If 65% of our people who are hungry and who are poor living in conflict-affected countries, what can we do about that? So there has to be political will to end those conflicts so we can build lives better. And COVID should be a wake-up call. I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that. Indeed, it is a wake-up call, and I really hope this world does not miss this moment and this opportunity to truly reimagine things and to build forward better and to tap that political will that is so desperately needed. So it's thanks to reports and to gatherings and to partnerships amongst the leaders here that I hope we can get there. So moving on to WHO and Ms. Jakob, how do food systems affect health? And what does this mean for the work of WHO?
First of all, let me say that I fully agree that young people, children, women, and vulnerable population groups should be involved in moving forward and in solving these problems. As you asked, Lana, many of the public health goals rely on effective functioning of the food systems. The safety, the nutritional quality of the food produced and supplied, the affordability, they all affect the dietary goals and the diet-related health goals, but they also affect the environmental goals. And because of all these interactions, it is very important to have a transformation of the food system, which is an important priority for WHO. And we promote to put health at the center of the food systems with 5 major pathways using a One Health approach. Which are these 5 pathways? First of all, unhealthy diet and food insecurity. Secondly, zoonotic pathogens and antimicrobial resistance. Thirdly, unsafe and adulterated foods. Fourthly, environmental contamination and degradation. And fifthly, occupational hazards. And I could elaborate on what are the impacts, but in order to save time, I will not go into these details. We support very strongly member states working with partners to take actions along these 5 pathways for better human, animal, and planetary health. And at the same time, we also support member states to build more equitable and more resilient health systems with a very strong food system transformation component. And that will have many impacts on moving this agenda forward, including issues that have been already raised by my colleagues, like Henrietta referred to breast milk, the importance of breastfeeding, and also to use fully the tools and mechanisms that we already have in place, like, for example, for marketing and promotion of breast milk substitutes, which is a code which should be very much supported by many of the players around this table, but also many other partners around the world. Thank you, and back to you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Jakob. Thank you for that call for a One Health approach with a focus on healthy people, but also a healthy planet. And now moving to IFAD, Mr. Ziegler. How can an organization like IFAD work to transform food systems, particularly in rural areas?
Yeah, very good question. Very good question. I mean, in the COVID response, we have done several things. We have repurposed some 200 million in the ongoing programs to really be able to react swiftly where we have structures already in place. Then we created the so-called Rural Poor Stimulus Facility, which was a specific window for new COVID-related programs where we collected some 100 million from our member states and leveraged a lot of additional funding from FAO, from the World Bank and regional banks. So living up to the promise, not just of a better cooperation within the Rome-based agencies, but also of the UN system as such, and even beyond the UN system. So I think that was a first step. For the other major challenges, one I mentioned earlier, climate change. We also created a specific window that we call ASAP Plus, which is designed to help countries, to help farmers, to help particularly those in the most in the poorest areas, in the poorest regions of the poorest countries, to overcome climate change, to adapt better to the new realities of climate change, more resilient seeds and things like this. So that is another very important tool where, frankly, we could need additional funding also from our member states, so far for the commercial block. And then finally, we have created a private sector facility because we feel that till now we are not really living up to the Addis agenda, which has requested us to mobilize more private funding, international as well as local private funding. And this is a tool where with IFAD seed funding, we can reduce the risks for private investors, be it via structured funds, be it via guarantees, so that at least the perceived risks of investments in poorer countries, which are much higher than the real risks, can be reduced. And therefore, it helps to crowd in private finance, because let's be realistic, with public finance alone, we'll never be able to achieve any of the SDGs. We'll always need private finance. And therefore, IFAD is putting more and more emphasis on this. Back to you, Lana. Many thanks.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And thank you for that call for private finance and the importance of the private sector in this complicated picture. So now, thank you, principals, for keeping to our lightning round. Let's transition to our members segment and hear from our members. I do want to say we are still running late, but we want to hear as many voices as we can. So if I can kindly ask our members to try and stick to the 2 to 3 minutes that we ask so we can hear from as many as possible. We are trying to respect our hard stop at noon. So without further ado, we have the honor to start with His Excellency Dag Inge Ulstein, the Minister of International Development of Norway.
Thank you so much, Lana, and also Maximo for a very good and concrete update. And at the same time, really heartbreaking truth you're giving us when we look at the data and the situation on the ground. And also thank you for this opportunity. A lot is said, but this is so important because 1.5 years ago, as we were entering this decisive decade, ready to accelerate our efforts to reach the historic goal of eradicating hunger and extreme poverty, all of us know what happened. The virus hit us, and the great leap of action we were hoping for gave, as we heard, way too depressing setbacks. So today we have learned that what these setbacks exactly are. More than 800 million people go hungry, and billions do not have access to adequate food. And this challenge comes in addition to all the other work we have ahead of us: saving lives, securing vaccines for low-income countries, and stalling the socio-economic downturn which the pandemic has led to. The pandemic is not only testing our ability to save lives, but also our ability to save the fine architecture of international cooperation we have spent so many decades raising. So if a two-track pandemic is continued to unfold, it will devour the trust we need in order to rebuild together and diminish our chances to reaching the Sustainable Development Goals. The state of food security and nutrition is dramatic, as this year's report clearly shows. The growing number of poor communities and vulnerable people who suffer from lack of access to food is outright shocking. In 2021, this is unacceptable. But until we take urgent, unprecedented, and system-based action, it is actually being accepted by us. The UN Food System Summit in September will be an important milestone, provided we turn into a stepping stone for bold action. So we highly commend the initiative to establish a Zero Hunger Coalition, and we look forward to discussing it at the pre-summit later this month. The summit must decisively address the staggering food insecurity presented by the UN today, and Norway will do its part. In line with our focus on leaving no one behind, including children with disabilities, we have joined the School Meals Coalition. Nutritious food come from oceans, rivers, and lakes must also become a far more significant part of food security. We also stand up for small-scale farmer rights to decide which seeds to use. Diversity of plant genetic resources is vital for farmers' ability to adapt to climate change. Without food security, there will neither be development nor security. Norway is implementing our action plan of sustainable food systems in our foreign policy and development cooperation, and through more than 50 different projects and programs, we aim to improve food production and value chains, food markets and nutrition, especially for the most vulnerable. So just to finish, we really must take into account that climate change changes the world already, destroying harvest and forcing millions to flee their homes. So this spring, Norway launched a strategy to strengthen climate adaptation and prevention of climate-related disasters. And we will promote action for resilience and climate adaptive measures. And Norway will significantly increase development assistance to climate adaptation and building resilience. We can only end hunger, eradicate poverty, and reach the whole 2030 agenda if we act together, if we act boldly, if we realize how interconnected all our 17 goals are, if we act now. So thank you, and over to you again, Lana.
Thank you so much, Minister, for that passionate call to action. Moving swiftly on, I want to just explain, we did have previous requests, so we do see your hands raised, and we will be moving through our list as rapidly as possible. So thank you for keeping your statements brief. I would like to now recognize Ambassador Walton Alfonso Webson, the permanent representative of Antigua and Barbuda to the United Nations and chair of the Alliance of Small Island States. Ambassador, you're on mute.
Okay, great. So you can hear me now.
Yes, thank you.
So thank you very much. First of all, I want to thank FAO for this report. It's very timely and it's very comprehensive and helpful. I want to thank the speakers before because they were so practical, and the information they shared was very significant in our way forward. Let me point out one thing with regards to the report, and that is that small island states, the part of the world that I represent, I am wondering with FAO in looking at this report, if we could do an analysis on the data specific to small island states, because at times we get lost if we put it into the region into which we lie. one of the effects of the pandemic it was the detrimental impact it had on between 40 to 85% of small-scale food producers. This is particularly alarming in the small states, as empowering small-scale producers in our context, fisher folks, micro-enterprise folks, remain a critical component of our economy and diversification in building back. This is important because it affects gender impact, because many of the effect that the pandemic has had through enabling the small-scale producers to overcome these financial challenges. We should also utilize the recovery plans to enhance the capacity and improve access to markets and data for these and for our development. Agriculture, my friends, is at the heart of the economy of many of the developing countries and many of these small islands. Therefore, this transformation must carefully consider their specific needs and the capabilities to enable these island and their small-scale agricultural farmers to change the landscape. In this shift, we must also look at trade, because what we found out was that our supply chain, and as small island states, we are heavily dependent on trade, and our supply chain was badly affected. Trade is key in helping to stabilize the practices of food to ensure that it is affordable for all populations. And poverty has a direct, undeniable link to malnutrition. And we know that in small island states, we have the issue of malnutrition. In my previous life, I had the honor to work with nutritional blindness. And I am aware of the tragedy in small island states with nutritional blindness as well. Finally, in achieving all of these transformational goals, it is essential that the environmental integrity is at the heart of our decisions. Well-informed policy decisions guided by the latest science must inform the process and provide the data that is critical for us to address both the food shortage with the knowledge that our environment is critical for the development and delivery of all of us. I have shortened my remarks to keep in the time you put, Lana, and I can share my full remarks, but thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. I appreciate your comments. And now moving to Ambassador Amrit Bahadur Rai, the permanent representative of Nepal to the United Nations on behalf of the group of the least developed countries.
Thank you, Lana, for the floor. All protocols observed. I'm honored to be here today speaking on behalf of the group of least developed countries. As we continue to fight with COVID-19 pandemic, the state of food security and nutrition in the world report is timely, which highlights the need for a deeper reflection on how to address the dire situation of food security and nutrition around the world. Congratulate the FAO and all the UN agencies involved in the preparation of this year's report. The COVID-19 pandemic disproportionately affected LDCs, exacerbated inequalities, and is pushing us further back. And more than 700 million people go to bed on an empty stomach each night. It is a sheer disgrace on the touted pinnacle of a human achievement that was elucidated one of the speakers before. The situation is especially concerning in terms of hunger and malnutrition, as the SOFI report warns us. But the report also points some paths forward in assessing the scale of the challenges ahead and equip us to make informed decisions to end hunger. And we want to emphasize the importance of investing in rural areas in LDCs. Most of the extreme poverty is concentrated in rural areas, and most of the rural areas work in agri-food systems. Investing in making agri-food system more inclusive and productive is therefore a paramount to our efforts to defeat hunger and malnutrition, and also poverty. And this must be combined with increased social protection to ensure that nobody goes to bed hungry. The upcoming Food Systems Summit will be a great opportunity to ensure renewed global partnership that can help us reach these goals and build coalitions to take these actions forward. And we need a strong political will and strong political policy response, and that must be accompanied by the adequate resources, and we need higher investment and meaningful partnership to end hunger, particularly in LDCs. Thank you. Back to you, Lana.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And now I'd like to pass the floor to Ambassador Stefano Stefanile, the Charge d'Affaires and Deputy Permanent Representative of Italy, speaking on behalf of the Group of Friends of Food Security and Nutrition.
Thank you very much, Lana. And as you said, I'm making these remarks on behalf of the Group of Friends of Food Security and Nutrition, a New York-based cross-regional group of 45 UN member states which advocate for constant and active commitment towards SDG 2. We attach great importance to the annual presentation of the state of food security and nutrition in the world, a report which also this year highlights the urgency of a renewed global action towards food security and nutrition for all. We commend the interagency collaboration which is at the basis of this report, especially among the three Rome-based agencies, UNICEF and WHO, and we encourage further integrated UN and multi-stakeholder action, including with the Committee on Food Security, to address the root causes of food insecurity and malnutrition. We recognize the impact of the several multidimensional threats to food security, and we confirm our commitment in favor of effective actions at all levels. As recalled in previous interventions, even before the COVID-19 pandemic and after years of steady progress, we were already seeing new increases in the number of people affected by food insecurity, and the pandemic has further challenged the food systems and the state of food security. And we are now at a critical moment to correct the course. We heard clearly today from several presentations that we are off track and that the trajectory must be urgently rectified. And in order to do that, we should promote a comprehensive approach encompassing, among other factors, the role of small-scale and family farmers, having consideration for the interrelations between local, regional, and global productions, the importance of healthy diets, the empowerment of rural people, especially women and youth, and we should assure sustainability in its three dimensions and address key areas like access to and resilience of trade and value chains. Over the last year, the Group of Friends has engaged proactively to promote and contribute to the preparation process of the Food Systems Summit. And the summit will represent indeed a culminating moment and a unique opportunity to recommit to more sustainable, resilient, inclusive, and equitable food systems, which may deliver for all of us. And in this way, we look forward to the upcoming pre-summit in Rome at the end of this month, which will be, of course, a key moment on the road to the summit in September in New York. Now, allow me very quickly to add very few remarks in my national capacity, focusing on the role that Italy is currently playing as presidency of the G20. Food security, nutrition, and food systems were at the center of the recent G20 Foreign Affairs and Development Ministerial meeting, which adopted Matera Declaration on Food Security, Nutrition, and Food System. In this declaration, which includes a call to action, G20 members expressed deep concern for the state of food insecurity across the world and highlighted the key actions to achieve the zero hunger goal: poverty alleviation, access to safe and nutritious food, socioeconomic empowerment of women and youth, ensuring resilient and sustainable food systems and value chains, and providing integrated and multidimensional approaches, including with regard to climate action, which was mentioned before in many interventions. Support was also expressed for the Food Coalition, the multi-stakeholder platform proposed by Italy and launched within the FAO to mobilize political, financial, policy, and technical support based on the needs and demands of the developing countries. And now it is indeed fundamental that all these efforts converge towards the effective holding of the Food System Summit and of its upcoming pre-summit in Rome. And I thank you.
Thank you so much for those remarks, and thank you for sharing the G20 declaration as well. Moving along to Ambassador Taniwat Kiensen, the permanent representative of Thailand to the Rome-based agencies and Committee on World Food Security Chair.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, Thailand would like to express our appreciation for the joint effort of the UN agencies in transforming food system for food securities, approved nutrition and affordable healthy diets for all. And also would like to congratulate to this comprehensive report that you just presented us today. The SOFI report presented here give us some indication of what situation of hunger would look like during and after the COVID-19 pandemic. The report also informed us and trigger us what we need to do more if we want to end hunger and malnutrition during this unprecedented situation. With the governments and international organizations' response and effort at the local, national, and global level, several impressive social protection measures have put in place during the COVID-19 crisis to ensure food securities and nutrition for all, particularly for the most vulnerable and those living in fragile situations. However, the COVID-19 crisis and the unprecedented economic recessions would worsen the situation. I would like to take this opportunity to remind you that recently at the 47 sessions of the Committee on World Food Security, CFS, we just endorsed the voluntary guideline on food system and nutrition. And this voluntary guideline is the only negotiated global policy document that addresses to the issues of food securities and nutrition. And we do hope that the voluntary guideline will be translated into action at the country level. Therefore, we need to work together. We need to support each other. We need to protect life of millions around the world. We together need to overcome the most difficult and significant challenges to ending hunger and food insecurities and all forms of malnutrition. Our commitments and efforts will build forward better from the COVID-19 pandemic. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much for your commitment and for your words, Ambassador. And now I'd like to give the floor to Ambassador Guang Defu, the permanent representative of the People's Republic of China to the UN agencies for food and agriculture.
听了各位的发言，非常受启发。这个报告非常全面，非常好。参加这个论坛很有意义。在新冠肆虐的今天，粮食体制转型，对疫情过后尽快恢复生产，实现2030年可持续发展目标，具有非常迫切的现实意义。中国作为世界最大的发展中国家，作为人口大国，解决好自己的粮食问题和饥饿问题，也是对人类的最大贡献。中国已经连续17年实现粮食丰收，连续6年每年粮食产量稳定在6.5亿吨以上。中国人均粮食占有量稳定在人均470公斤，高于人均400公斤的国际标准线。中国的减贫事业成效显著，2013年以来， 我们每年有1000万人口脱贫。目前，中国农村贫困人口已经全部脱贫。中方愿与世界各国共同努力，继续推动粮食和农业系统转型变革，构建资源节约、环境友好、绿色导向的气候智能型农业。我们为全球解决粮食安全、减少零饥饿，是最大的善行，是最大的善事。中方愿意继续加大力度，支持两种组织手拉手行动计划等各项倡议，积极发挥南南极三方合作等平台作用，帮助广大发展中国家提高生产力，为保障全球范围内的粮食安全和改善营养水平、消灭零饥饿，共同努力。谢谢各位。
Thank you, Ambassador. We are running close to time, but I've gotten clearance that we can go over just a little bit more, just so we can allow everyone to have their voice and moment on the floor. So again, if we can just try and keep it tight so that we can hear from everyone. Without further ado, let me pass it to Ambassador Carolyn Rodriguez Birkett, the permanent representative of the Cooperative Republic of Guyana to the United Nations.
Thank you very much, Lana, and let me join as well in thanking our distinguished heads of FAO, UNICEF, WFP, WHO, and IFAD, and the speakers that have given us such valued information. We wish to thank all of the teams for providing this global panorama on where we are on the state of food security and nutrition in the world. Unfortunately, it does not bear good news, and we are not on track to achieving the SDGs. For Guyana, we lament that progress has not been made, as it should, even as we acknowledge the role of the pandemic in this. But we cannot despair, not now, not ever. We know the solutions. Maximo Torero, the chief economist of FAO, outlined these so eloquently, as some of the other speakers as well. What we need is the means to make it happen, including the political will and the financing. And in this regard, the president of Guyana, in his capacity as lead head for agriculture in CARICOM, has made it his mission to advance the strengthening of regional food systems and regional food security in the Caribbean. As you are aware, the Caribbean region is a net importer of food and also one of the regions with the highest rates of NCDs. Needless to say, we were not exempted from the effects of COVID. And in preparation for the Food Systems Summit, stakeholders across the region met to discuss food security, climate resilience, and financing. These were identified as critical in order for us to advance the SDGs, and in particular, the one that we're speaking about today, SDG 2. The CARICOM heads have also approved a strategy for regional food security, and a special ministerial task force have been established to follow up on the implementation of this strategy. And so as the region moves forward with implementing this strategy, the continued support of the 5 agencies that have produced SOFI 2021, and indeed others, will be critical. And I'd like to end by thanking all of these agencies for the work they're doing, and to underscore the need for adequate financing for these agencies as well, as it is for our countries as we move forward to make hunger and food insecurity obsolete. I thank you all.
Thank you so much, Ambassador. And now moving to Ambassador Maria de Fatima Hardin, the permanent representative of Angola to the Rome-based agencies. Ambassador Maria de Fatima Hardin, are you with us? Okay, perhaps she had to leave. We'll move swiftly to Ambassador Ali Coulibaly, the permanent representative of the Republic of Mali to FAO in Rome. Calling once, calling twice. Yes, I did say we had a hard stop, so perhaps people had to go to their next
Merci beaucoup. Merci beaucoup, madame. Merci de m'avoir donné la parole. Je voudrais, à la suite de mes prédécesseurs, remercier les présentateurs qui ont bien voulu nous présenter un rapport exhaustif sur l'état de la faim dans le monde et surtout les solutions préconisées. Je voudrais insister un peu sur la situation qui prévaut dans le Sahel et qui mérite une attention particulière au nombre de raisons évoquées qui font aujourd'hui que la situation alimentaire est alarmante à travers le continent africain, figure en bonne place les conflits liés au changement climatique. Il n'est un secret pour personne que cela est une situation préoccupante et je voudrais ici et maintenant demander à ce que ce qui a été évoqué comme solution par l'économiste Maximo et qui est fortement appréciable, que cela soit un élément fondamental permettant à la FAO, dans le cadre de son appui aux pays en situation difficile, pour pouvoir nous aider à adopter ces solutions et essayer de transgresser la faim afin que nous soyons dans un monde meilleur. Merci aux présentateurs, merci à vous pour la bonne coordination. Merci à tous.
Merci beaucoup, monsieur. And now, if we can move to Ambassador Tomás Jurado, the permanent representative of Panama to the Rome-based agencies. Ambassador Jurado, are you with us? Forgive me, I'm unable to see everybody and who is still with us. All right, we'll move to Ambassador Gustavo Mostajo, the permanent representative of Peru to the Rome-based agencies. Ambassador Mostajo. All right. Moving swiftly along. Ambassador Don Porfirio Pestana de Barros, the permanent representative of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela to the Rome-based agencies. All right, I think people may have given up on getting the floor, so I will take this opportunity then to close our event and wrap up our member segment. And thank you all for joining us. As we've heard from all of the passionate calls to action from all of our distinguished panelists, we are not on track for zero hunger, and there is so much to do. But thankfully, with the launch of this year's SOFI report, there are pathways for transformation, for resilience, for inclusion, for equity. And I hope that together with the collaboration that's been demonstrated here and the commitment that's been pledged by all the member states present, that we can harness the political will and the investment and all the partnerships and collaboration that are needed to address this issue. It is simply unacceptable that we have the millions and billions who are hungry and without access to affordable and healthy food. So the world really is at a critical juncture. So let's all work together to fix our food systems, to free the world of hunger, food insecurity, and malnutrition in all its forms. Thank you so much for joining us today. And if you'd like to continue the conversation online, please remember to use the hashtag SOFI2021. I'm Lana Wong from Washington, DC, signing off today. Thank you so much.
Thank you.